The day began long before sunrise. In the quiet of the crew quarters at Cape Kennedy, there was no rush, no nervousness. Everything followed the plan, just as it had thousands of times in the simulators. A brief medical exam confirmed what we already knew. The crew was in excellent shape, rested, and ready. Then came the traditional launch day breakfast, steak and eggs. We were joined by Deke Slayton, our direct superior, and fellow astronaut Bill Anders. This wasn't just a meal, it was a carefully managed ritual, part of a kind of engineered calm that defined our entire preparation. The suiting up process was unhurried. The schedule had a built-in time buffer to handle any small issues without rushing. This feeling of a measured pace, the absence of a time crunch, was critical for maintaining our psychological balance. NASA had built a cocoon of controlled routine around us to shield us from the colossal pressure of the historic moment. The ride in the special van to Launch Pad 39A was a strange procession. Then, the elevator ride up to the White Room, where Gunter Vent's team was waiting for the final boarding procedures. My senses sharpened. The hum of the suit's life support system, the scent of pure oxygen we'd been breathing for hours to purge nitrogen from our blood. The process of getting into our seats was automatic. I went into the left seat first, then Mike Collins into the right. Buzz Aldrin took the center seat last. Although that was typically the command module pilot seat, Mike had joined our crew later, and Buzz had already completed all his training in that configuration. Even then, a minor technical snag reminded us we were dealing with incredibly complex machinery, not an idealized symbol. As we settled in, one of the control handles caught on a lock for the seat's shock-absorbing strut. It took a good deal of pulling and coordinating to fix it, and then the hatch was closed. The click of the locks marked a profound transition. We were physically cut off from all of humanity, sealed in a tiny capsule, yet at the same time, we were more connected than ever through the communication network. Every flip of a switch, every instrument reading, was monitored by hundreds of specialists in Houston. It was the paradox of the modern explorer: absolute isolation and total connection. I was in my own little world, which was simultaneously the focal point of a global network spanning the entire planet. The final seconds of the countdown. A voice from the speakers announced, T-minus 15 seconds, guidance is internal. Ignition! It wasn't a sudden jolt in the back, as you might expect. It was a deep, all-encompassing vibration that I felt through my entire body, in my bones, not my ears. The whole launch tower trembled with us. The ascent felt slow, almost majestic, though when I glanced at the timer, I saw everything was precisely on schedule. I wasn't a passenger. I was a pilot, comparing my sensations with the expected parameters. The noise level was surprisingly low and didn't interfere with communications. The machine was working exactly as it should. The separation of the first stage, then the second. Each phase was marked by a jolt and a change in vibration. Then the SIVB third stage engine fired, pushing us into Earth orbit, and then silence. The roar and shaking were replaced by absolute quiet and weightlessness. In the window, the perfect curve of Earth's horizon was set against the coal black of space. The mission had truly begun. We had to separate from the SIVB stage, turn the command module Columbia around, and dock with the lunar module Eagle, which was still housed in its adapter. It was a delicate maneuver requiring surgical precision, somewhat reminiscent of my work on Gemini 8. The click of the latches confirmed a successful docking. Later, I would utter a famous phrase on the radio, but it was at this moment that we truly brought our lunar ship aboard. The sight of the S-4B stage drifting away was strange and mesmerizing. The 3-day journey began. Life inside the ship settled into a measured rhythm. System checks, navigation sightings on the stars, meals and rest periods. Gradually, our psychological state shifted. Earth, our home, shrank before our eyes, becoming a shining blue and white marble. As I later noted, we could see a lot of detail on the surface of the Earth. Certainly, all the continents and islands. In quiet moments, looking at the stars, I sometimes thought of the unusual music I had brought with me. Its unearthly sound was a perfect match for the strangeness of our surroundings. The moon was no longer a distant object in the sky. It was becoming a world. We prepared for the Lunar Orbit Insertion, or LOI maneuver. This was the first critical engine burn since leaving Earth orbit, and the tension on board was rising. As we went behind the far side of the moon, communication with Houston was cut off. Our onboard voice transcript captured the moment of awe. "Damn, a geologist would go crazy here," Mike exclaimed. My first thought was, what a spectacular view. We immediately began debating its color. "It's brown," Buzz said. I agreed, but to me it looked more yellowish brown. The surface was harsh, a rugged terrain scarred by craters and gargantuan mountains. This moment marked an important internal shift. The entire flight until then had been an engineering task. But the sight of the lunar landscape up close changed everything. Our language, as the transcripts show, shifted from technical to rapturous. We were no longer just pilots flying a machine. We became explorers contemplating a new world. The engine performed flawlessly. We entered an elliptical orbit. "Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful," Mike exclaimed as the orbit parameters appeared on the display, his delight conveying our collective sense of relief and success. Our last sleep period in lunar orbit. A wake-up call from Houston. A morning news report read over the radio. There was a sense of finality in the air. Today was the day. The next time we slept, it would be on the surface of the moon. Buzz and I moved through the docking tunnel from Columbia into the lunar module. Eagle was completely different, cramped, utterly functional, built for a single purpose. There was a feeling of familiarity, like being in the simulator, but now it was all real. This little angular craft was our lifeboat and our ticket to the surface. I trusted it. As I would later say, all the systems on the lunar module worked magnificently. It was a beautiful machine. Final checks with Mike, who remained in Columbia. We were again on the far side of the moon, out of radio contact. On command, with a slight shudder, the pyrotechnic bolts fired, and the two ships separated. I looked through the window and saw Columbia slowly drifting away against the lunar horizon. It was a beautiful and slightly lonely sight. Mike was now completely alone, a sentinel in orbit. When we came around from behind the lunar disk and re-established contact with Houston, I reported, "The Eagle has wings." It was a statement of fact, but for us, it meant something more. We were now a fully autonomous craft, ready for the descent. The descent orbit insertion maneuver had already put us on the right trajectory. Now came the main event. Powered Descent Initiation, or PDI. The engine ignited, softly at first, then ramping up to full thrust. The 12 minutes of falling began. Numbers cycled on the display. Buzz called out the data in a monotone. My job was to monitor the systems and be ready to take over at any moment. The window was useless. We were flying toward the moon backwards. Suddenly, a yellow warning light and a master alarm. "Program alarm," Buzz reported. I asked for the code. 1202, he replied. There was no room for panic. This was an engineering problem. The craft was flying steady. I trusted the machine, but I trusted the team on the ground even more. "Houston, give us a reading on the 1202 program alarm." The seconds of waiting felt like an eternity. The voice of Charlie Duke came through my headset, a little excited but clear. "Roger, we'll go on that alarm." A wave of relief. The alarms, 1202 and later 1201, kept coming. And each time, Houston gave us the go to continue. Only later did we learn the full story. It was the direct result of a failure during a training simulation, when this exact alarm had forced an abort. An infuriated Flight Director Gene Kranz had demanded that his specialists, particularly Steve Bales and Jack Garman, master every possible error code. When the 1202 code appeared, they instantly knew it was a computer overload caused by our rendezvous radar switch being in the wrong position. The computer was smart enough to ignore the less important tasks and focus on flying the ship. Sitting in the module, I didn't know the details, but I felt the result. A calm, confident voice from Houston telling me to press on. My trust was justified not by luck, but by the highest level of professionalism. We executed the pitch-over maneuver. Now I could see the lunar surface. I looked for landmarks and realized we were flying long. We were going to miss our landing spot by several miles. The computer was taking us toward a large crater with very large boulders and rocks. The autopilot was flying us into a death trap. There was no time for discussion. My test pilot instincts took over. I switched the computer to a semi-automatic mode. I was now flying the Eagle myself, using the controller to find a safe clearing. My manual control was costing us precious fuel. The tension mounted with every call from Houston. 60 seconds, Charlie Duke reported. Then 30 seconds. The entire world narrowed to my window, the control stick in my hand, and the sound of that countdown. I saw a good spot. I had to land the vehicle. I was aware of the fuel problem, but a safe landing was the primary task. In that moment, the 30 seconds call meant we were at the absolute limit, set by mission rules. The final moments. "Kicking up some dust," Buzz reported. "I saw our shadow on the surface. A probe on one of the landing legs touched the ground." "Contact light," said Buzz. My final action was to shut down the engine. Silence. The hum and vibration were gone. A deep, absolute silence filled the cabin. We were still. We were safe. A brief, professional handshake with Buzz. A smile of satisfaction on our faces. I keyed the microphone. "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." Immediately after landing, we ran through the checklist. The adrenaline slowly receded, replaced by a feeling of profound satisfaction. I looked out my small triangular window, the lunar landscape. It wasn't hostile. It was a stark and strangely different place, but it looked friendly, and it proved to be friendly. The horizon was unusually close due to the sharp curvature of the moon. In those quiet minutes, my thoughts turned to the next historic task. The whole world was waiting. What should I say? The thought formed right there on the surface. It wasn't planned in advance, but it wasn't a complete improvisation either. It was born in that very moment. That's one small step for a man.
That's one small step for man.
Yes, the article was important. It made the phrase personal, emphasizing the action of one specific person before speaking of the giant leap for all of humanity. The words were ready, ready to be spoken to the universe.